All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Lobby, Tim Bielik, Lance Reisling, getting the whole draft crew back together, trying to do this live for the first time here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. So hopefully all of that works. Hopefully all of you are able to join us we're able to join us on YouTube. So excited to have this opportunity to be live. If this goes well, we will, of course, continue to do this every week. We're going to do, so just so you guys know, let me lay out exactly what we're doing here over the next 3 weeks with these guys. So this week, we're talking quarterbacks. That's what everybody wants to talk about, right? Let's talk quarterbacks. So we'll start with the top two. We'll move on from there. Next week, we're going to get into some of the playmakers. That's when we'll get into like the Travis Hunters and the running backs and all that stuff. And then the week after that, we will get into edge rushers and everyone else. So we're going to cover everything you need here over the next 3 weeks. So if we do continue to go live here, it's going to be probably this time, Thursday nights at 6. These pods are going to go up on Fridays, so you're going to have plenty of time to listen to them and digest what we're saying about the draft every week. We're going to do a new mock draft. We're using the PFF mock simulator this week. Lance, I cannot wait to find out who your complete wild card is in all of this. I'm very excited about that. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get to it. If you are watching on YouTube, if you're one of the folks checking us out, feel free to jump in that conversation and chat with us as we go along. I'll try and bring some of those in, and we'll do a little Q&A as well. And of course, if you're one of our Football Insider subscribers who's joining us, you guys are kind of our test subjects. So we certainly appreciate all of you being subscribers and joining in. So I've talked enough. Let's get into this. Let's start at the very top of this draft. Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And I've been looking forward to this because I think the three of us have kind of differing opinions on these guys. I think we all like these guys, but I think we have differing opinions on them. So Tim, just to introduce Tim, if you're jumping on live and you haven't seen or heard Tim yet, I don't know what you're doing. He's our draft expert. He's the guy that knows these players inside and out. Tim, let's just start with Shedeur Sanders. He's been your guy really from the start, right?
Yeah, pretty much since I'd say the end of last year's draft for me, he was QB1 ahead of Carson Beck from Georgia. This year, I don't really think he did anything to sway me off of that opinion. Although I do have to accept that, the momentum from the combine and on with Cam Ward has been unmistakable. He's probably going to be the first overall pick, and I can understand why. On the surface, when you watch Shedeur Sanders play, he doesn't have those amazing physical traits that catch your eye like Cam Ward does, and we'll get to that more. But I think Shedeur's game is a little more understated just because he's so intelligent. His work ethic has been praised like crazy. When we did our last draft pod, I was talking about the article Charles Robinson had where Shedeur was really had the praise of Tom Brady for his work ethic and preparation ability and those sorts of things, his football intelligence. Those were things that really stood out to me about Shedeur. And for me, the number one thing I think when it comes to quarterbacks, we could talk so many traits about these guys, but for me, I've kind of had an epiphany about the quarterback position. And I think the number one thing I want to ask is, of these quarterbacks, did you elevate the guys you have around you, and did you make your team better? And with Shedeur Sanders, I think that's an unequivocal yes. And for me, as much as I still say Cam Ward's my QB1 just because I like those traits he has, that's why I'm higher on Shedeur more than most people, is because he's elevated his team to a level that they simply weren't at 2 years ago. And outside of Travis Hunter, he didn't have a whole lot of help to do it.
Okay, so Lance, I know you share some similar thoughts on Shedeur, and if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I'm going to, he is actually your top guy, right? You have him ahead of Cam?
I do, yes. And so people have said to me, what is it why would you, if Cam is better, why, then the quarterback, the coach needs to, kind of match, his scheme to the quarterback. They're so close, in my opinion. The pluses and minuses are all very close. But I've had him. I sent you that article earlier yesterday. Since January 19th, when I wrote why he's a better fit, I think he's a better quarterback. And the reason why is, for me, it's anticipation and accuracy. And going on what Tim said about making people around him. First of all, he's very, very tough. He took an absolute beating and completed over 70% of his passes. And we talk about like arm talent. Now he doesn't have elite arm talent, but for me, you get away with not having elite arm talent when you can anticipate and where you understand coverage and you anticipate where the holes are going to be. And he does a great job of that. He stands in the pocket. When he gets hit, his fundamentals, his footwork never change. Now, I do think that maybe Cam has a higher ceiling. I will say that. However, I also think Cam can be a bust more than Shador can. And that's, so I think, in terms of if you talk about grades, right? Cam could be an A+, but I think he could also be an F, where I'm not sure if Shador can ever be an A+, but I think he can be an A- and will always be a B. And once again, it's redundant with me, and I've started it, but it's quarterback you can win with. And you can win Super Bowls with quarterbacks you can win with. You don't have to be a quarterback you win because of. Now, Cam could be one of those quarterbacks, but in this scheme, I think Shador is just a better fit.
Okay, quick shout out. Jeffrey in our YouTube chat says, hello, fellas. I don't know if we're streaming on Instagram or not. I think in theory we were going to, but I don't know if that actually worked. But again, hey, first time. We're just trying this out. So anyway, I do know we're on YouTube. So shout out to Jeffrey. If you're watching there on YouTube, give us a holler as well. Okay, so let me talk about Cam Ward and kind of how I've evolved here. And we'll turn this into a quick little Cam Ward discussion. Maybe it's irrelevant to Browns fans because like you said, Tim, it seems like he's going to go number one. But I really kind of started to dig into these guys after the season was over. I had watched a little bit just casually on Saturdays, but, traveling, things like that, you don't always get to watch a bunch of these games. So I kind of dug in and I came away from my first watch of at least these top two guys, kind of torn. I wasn't sure who I liked better. And then I went into, watched some receivers, watched some running backs, watched some, kind of went away. And then probably 3 weeks ago, I went back to, I got to watch Cam again and I got to watch Shador again because it's been a little while. And for me, something clicked with Cam Ward. I don't know what it is. And I don't disagree with you, Lance. I see what it looks like if it's bad with him. Like I can close my eyes and look and see what it feels like if Cam Ward is a bust, right? Fumbling all the time, throwing interceptions, trying to, I could see that. But there's something there. There's something special with Cam Ward. And when you hear people talk about him, there's a great clip of Louis Riddick going around where he's talking to Kevin Clark about Cam Ward, how they viewed him as this culture changer at Miami. Just all of that stuff combined with when you just watch, when you watch the right Cam Ward game, man, it is absolutely electric. And that's why, Tim, I've kind of come around to the idea of if they're both there, and I don't think they will be, if they're both there, I would take Cam Ward. And I'm going to save my total Shador take for a little bit later.
Yeah, I 100% get that. And, listening to Daniel Jeremiah's conference call about a month or so ago, I actually asked him about, how do you differentiate between those two players if you have the choice in your GM? And he basically said kind of what you were saying is that if it's a tie almost, you go with the guy that you feel like has the higher ceiling. Although Lance, you kind of admitted that it feels like there's more outcomes for Cam Ward versus Shador Sr. as well. Cam Ward is not likely to be, his ceiling is likely to be higher than Shador's. His floor is worse than Shador's. So there's a lot more range. And I think it comes down to who's coaching him, who's he working with in Tennessee to help him get better. For example, if that's where he ends up going, like we all kind of feel like is going to happen. And actually, it was a nice experience to go to the combine. I was there at the Cam Ward interview with Mary Kay, just listening, and he really made an emphasis about talking about how he feels he's a better he really works and prides himself on being a pocket passer. And it made me kind of rewatch a couple games. And when you watch Cam Ward, if you just watch a highlight tape, you're going to watch a lot of the improvisation, the ability to, scramble out of the pocket, turn your back to the receivers, and then run to your left or to your right and make those kind of throws. But when you watch those, every throw from so-and-so game, for example, like his Florida game, he made a lot of nice pocket throws, and it was more than I was kind of expecting. And so you can understand, why NFL teams might be more excited about Cam Ward, because you see the maybe more ability to play in structure than maybe we all kind of initially thought. And that was one of my questions I had, was his ability with structure. And, after listening to talk, seeing him more, I think that kind of quieted those concerns for me down a little bit with Cam Ward.
Lance, let me ask you this about Cam. Are you more, I guess when you look at that, if let's say both of them were on the board, Are you more scared of Cam's failure or more excited by what he could be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for me, the reason I like Shador more than Cam, or Cam is below Shador for me, is that what you guys are saying is exactly right. But I'm also thinking about what the Browns are, and when you talk about that improvisation, when you talk about their offensive line, when you talk about their running game, their receivers, when you get into that improvisation game, you have to be really good at the scramble drill. This offensive line struggled with pass protection. Part of that is they didn't know where Deshaun Watson was going to be. That's a huge thing with quarterbacks who are mobile. That makes it really, really tough on them. So what a quarterback does, what Shador does. Now, Cam is very, he's got all the skills. And I agree with Tim. The more I watch him on film, he does do things from the pocket. But what makes him special is what made Deshaun Watson special in 2020. That ability to make plays happen when things aren't on schedule. And that has not seemed to work very well in Kevin Stefanski's offense. Now, what on schedule does is it allows you, if he could do that, you're right, that high ceiling might be worth it, because on schedule is what has made Kevin Stefanski's offense very good. It's what made Flacco very good. When you think about high lows, the idea, having Pat Shurmur as his offense coordinator, that helps a lot too. The idea that you have to win right now, there's no, in the NFL, I don't care what anybody says, you got to win. And I just think in terms of schematics, the high lows, the ins, outs, the smashes, the crossers, all that kind of stuff that, you run in the NFL. Pat Shurmur ran with Shador at Colorado. Now Cam gives you that, that you're not sure what you're going to get. And what you get a lot of time is spectacular stuff. And that's what is intriguing to people. I don't know. The Browns offense seems to be better when they're within structure and things go smoothly. And it's like a assembly line, right? This happens, this happens, this happens. Now, his ceiling is very high. That I will say. I need a sure thing. And I really think that Shador Sanders is going to be a really solid pro. Maybe not an all pro, but he's going to be a really solid pro.
Yeah, and see, for me, I would be more nervous about passing on, and I use this carefully because I don't think he's this guy, at least not at the stages where they were coming to the NFL. But when you do watch Cam Ward, you do see a little tiny bit of that. You do see a little bit of Jaden Daniels in there, I think. You see, especially the calm, the unflappability, what he's able to do. And I like Shador. But with Cam Ward, when you think about that upside and you think about how transformational that could be, and I also am kind of the belief that if you're picking at number 2, I know you always have to consider fit a little bit, but like you can't get too caught up in fit because you have the second pick. And if you pick a guy that fits Kevin Stefanski's offense, what happens if you go 4-13 next year and Kevin's not your coach anymore? So I think you have to take the best guy with the best upside, which is why I would I would actually just run up and turn in the card for Cam Ward. And as much as I like Shador, I'm not that level of excited for Shador, Tim.
I mean, I'm kind of with you a little bit. I mean, again, I feel like the idea of Shador's game, it's not flashy. I mean, I've thought about this in my own head that maybe, for lack of a better term, it's maybe it's the syndrome of watching highlights, because when you watch a guy on a highlight film, what's the first thing you're going to talk about? How far can he throw a football? How fast can he run? Is he making defenders miss? And by and large, Shador Sanders isn't really doing all those things. The stuff that you see with Shador is stuff you kind of have to look for and you kind of have to search for it. I was watching Pat McAfee, and Dan Orlovsky was talking about how basically you have to almost throw out maybe up to 75% of Shador's snaps, either because of scheme, where almost more than half of his throws are close to the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And then some of the other ones you have to throw out because his offensive line gave him no shot. I look at the Oregon game in 2023. His offensive line gave him no shot in that game. Nebraska 2024, same thing. And we have to remember, that was a Nebraska team that very nearly beat Ohio State in Columbus. Like, that was a Nebraska team that had a really good front, and I believe they were winning in the fourth quarter of that game in Columbus that they won. BYU, I usually like to take bowl games out of the equation unless they're playoff games, because there's so many extenuating circumstances, guys not playing, how motivated are guys when the game doesn't really count. So with Shador, I think feels more of an acquired taste. Like, you have to really dig in. You have to kind of see the nuance in the game and understand what the decisions he's making in certain things. With Cam Ward, it's easy to see. I mean, the ball just explodes out of his hand. It's effortless. It's effortless throwing with Cam Ward, and it's an arm that is as talented as is the most talented in this class, bar none, as far as accuracy and strength to all three levels of the field. So from that perspective, it's a question of the tools. I think if you're a coach, what can you work with? Because I think if you're a coach, you feel like you can tone down Cam Ward's superhero tendencies a little bit, rein him in just a little bit extra, and channel it better versus worrying whether or not you have to, calm Shador's happy feet in the pocket and his ability to drift backwards because of pressure and bad habits he may have learned over 2 seasons at Colorado. Those are just a couple things I see, but I'm kind of with you, Dan. I think you go upside, and I would rather swing and miss on ups. I know Lance is shaking his head, and this is coming from a Shador guy. I'm in the minority of the Shador train here that I would still take him at number 2. But I feel like if I had my choice between 2, it'd be Cam because I just see the tantalizing potential.
Lance, I want you to respond to that. I do want to say, and I'm going to kind of voice some of my concerns on Shador here in a second, but I'll let Lance go first because he's champing at the bit up there. And I do see Ryan in the chat is talking about Jackson Dart, maybe going a different direction to 2 and taking Jackson Dart later. We're going to get to Jackson Dart. We're going to talk about all the quarterbacks here. So we'll certainly get to him. But Lance, I want to let you respond to that, but I do want to say that for all my concerns with Shador, I would still, if the Browns took him number 2, I would be perfectly okay with that. And in fact, I feel like that's the direction they should go. But Lance, you have the floor.
Well, is there a position in pro football and all pro sports where so many people are wrong? And, we're in the same boat. All of us, we watch a lot of Browns, a lot of tape. We probably watch, as much tape as any, person who's not a player. And it's such a position in terms of like the it factor. How are they going to take care of their body? How do they handle the press? How do they handle all those things tied into it? And with a quarterback, that means a lot. It's funny, all those things you're saying, I'm shaking my head. When I was shaking my head, it was kind of a joke because those are all true. Everything with Cam, it's not a disagreement. And I think that's why the quarterback position is so hard to evaluate, because you're just not sure how they're going to fit in your scheme. How do they fit when they have to move? All those things, these are young kids, and it all ties into it. And it's such a position. It's such, as we've seen the last couple of years, when you don't have that guy, regardless of who's around you, maybe that's part of my issue is that I know that let me say, I don't know. I feel like Shador Sanders gives you a B, and I think the Browns can win with a B. And I think a lot of teams can win with a B. I don't know if he can be an A, but I know you can win with a B, though I think Cam can be an A+. There's a lot of Patrick Mahomes. There's a lot of 2020 Deshaun Watson, where you're making things that you just kind of, go, okay, you tip your cap and go, you can't do anything about that if you're a defense. But Shador is going to give you, I just think with the background of having his father in terms of being around the game. And I just think he gives you a solid base with, you're going to get what you get. And I don't want to roll the dice. I think the Browns, they need to get some solid picks. And if they don't feel that the upside's there, then you got to go somewhere else. Then you go with another option. You go with the 3, my top 3 guys aren't quarterbacks. So maybe you go another route, because I agree with you in terms of, if you pick him at 2, he's your guy. You pick a guy at 33 or later, he doesn't have to be your guy, right? I mean, I don't know. You guys are better in that than me, but on film, I just think his anticipation and accuracy, they mean a lot to me, and he is outstanding at it. He throws the ball into windows as good as anybody I've seen.
Okay, so go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, going back to Lance's point that we have not been able to predict how quarterback works. I think we're in an analytics age where we're starting to get more clues than ever to who's going to succeed. Like offensive linemen, if you run the short shuttle in 4.47 seconds or faster, that's typically a mark that you're going to be a quality starter for a long time. Pass rushers, it's all about pass rush win rate and how high can that be. Running backs, explosive run rate, for example. That's something we'll get into next week. We talk about skill players. I'm a big proponent of that. But quarterbacks, there's really no answer. And I think it's just because there's no magic formula. There's so many ways to do it. There's what Jalen Hurts was able to do. He can run, he could throw, and he just won Super Bowl MVP. There's guys like Mahomes who are improvisational guys, Josh Allen, who is a physical force of nature, Lamar Jackson, who is probably the most elite running quarterback, with the exception of Michael Vick, and Joe Burrow, who, as smart as there is at quarterback, there's no magic formula to who the quarterback is. It's just comes down, I guess, to your own evaluation, and in some cases, it's just luck.
Quarterback is the hardest position to evaluate. There's no doubt about that. So, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my concerns about Shough Sanders with you guys, and you guys can alleviate my fears. I do want to say, though, and I this is the nature of kind of what we're doing here. I'm going to say this stuff, and people are going to be like, oh, my God, Dan hates Shough Sanders. Okay. In the chat, Amber thinks I was knocking him because he was throwing to Travis Hunter. I'm not knocking him for throwing to Travis Hunter. You're right. He was his best player. You got to throw to Travis Hunter. So I don't want people to misconstrue this. And she also points out that this is probably a pointless argument because Cam won't be there. So we should focus on Shough Sanders. But these are my concerns about Shough. And I do think a lot of them came out in the BYU game. Tim, to your point, I think bowl games are weird. I think you have a month, 3 weeks. You have so much time before that. Just the fact that he played in it was great. But my concerns with Shough are this. One, I think he's very accurate. That's not a concern. I think he does throw with anticipation. That's not a concern. I think even though his offensive line was really bad, I think he's responsible for a good amount of sacks that he takes. I think he can sometimes be a little slow to process. And I think that sometimes he can get himself in trouble when he tries to do a little too much in the pocket. And I worry how that's my biggest concern. I worry how that's going to translate when you're facing NFL pass rushers and you're facing defensive coordinators that are watching this tape and spending 100 hours every week saying, hey, pressure this kid. He's going to panic and he's going to take sacks. He's going to hold the ball. So for all the good that I see in Shough, I do have concerns about how his game that we saw in college translates to the NFL when it comes to dealing with pressure, getting away from pressure. And now he's mobile enough that he can find a seam and run for a first down. That's fine. But I see a world where Shough Sanders takes 50 sacks next year and throws 18 interceptions. And he's kind of that kind of guy for his whole career. That's my concern. That to me is the downside of Shough Sanders. That's the chance you take if you take him at number 2. And I will also add to this that maybe a lot of that was him just feeling like he had to do too much. And so he was trying to keep plays alive he shouldn't have. So all of that said, Tim, Lance, you each can take a turn here. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why that's not something I should be concerned about.
Well, I'll kind of pass this to Lance with this question, and it goes back to my point I had that, Shough had like no help. I mean, arguably the worst offensive line in college football, maybe not even just the FBS. I'm sure there was probably FCS lines that were better than what Shough had. And Colorado had the worst run game in the FBS, 11 yards fewer per game than a winless Kent State team had in 2024. I don't mean
let's not turn this into any Kent State slander here. Did you hear about Rob Senderoff's contract extension? Come on, let's talk about the positives.
I'm complimenting them. They had a better run game than Shough Sanders had. I'm throwing a compliment their way here. But I guess the point I want to make to Lance is, I mean, when you're going up against Colorado, when you're scheming up for a team like that can only throw, that's the only thing they can do. How much easier does it make it if you're scheming up a defense to basically say their run game means nothing? Like, we could have a light box the whole time, just pin our ears back and go get the quarterback. How much does you think that affects the quarterback? And in your time coaching, how many times do you face a team that was really heavy pass, and how much that you feel like that influences your game plan?
Well, that's a great point. And, the thing that makes it really tough in terms of evaluation is, Dan, I think you're right. In terms of his drifting, that's a bad habit. And you drift. I remember, I had some bad habits as well. We all do as players. But that drifting comes from A and B gap pressure, because the interior protection for him was worse than the edge protection. That interior, when you get A and B gap pressure, there is nothing worse than A and B gap pressure. So I think what he was trying to do was trying to create more time in terms of just with that 3.8 second window that we like to work in as coordinators, trying to get rid of the ball under 4. Now, going back to what you said, Tim, I think that's a great point, because if you face an all run team or all pass team, you don't have to honor the offensive line. And that was always kind of my case as a coordinator, is I wanted the team. That's why I think it's so important. You guys have heard me say, get into 2nd and 4, because if you can get the 2nd, 4, 2nd and 5, then that defensive line has to cover that offensive lineman. He has to read what that offensive lineman does. Does he reach? Does he down block? Does he base block? Does he pass set? He has to do all those things. And then the defensive lineman has to react to it. When you play an all pass team, you get in those wide 3s, you get in those wide 5s, you stunt, you play coverage. I think what makes Hunter even more impressive is that teams tried to take him away. They just couldn't, because he's so talented and safety. And they had other pretty solid receivers too, but now you can play coverage. So not only are you getting the A and B gap pressure, but now you have extra defenders. I mean, there's times when you watch on film, it's 1st and 10 and they're dropping 8. And when you drop 8, that means you have to create time, because guys got to find windows. There's no windows to throw the ball when teams are dropping 8, because it's a prevent defense. You should be running the ball. So it does tie into it. The thing that I will say, Dan, to rebut your a little bit about drifting, is that the thing that didn't change with him that I was really impressed with was his ability not to lose his fundamentals and footwork when you're getting killed. A lot of times, I remember getting hit and you just kind of get rid of the ball and your feet aren't set and you don't do those things. It seemed like he's a very tough quarterback. The contact doesn't bother him because his fundamentals stay true. His footwork stays true. He transfers his weight. He does all those things you do with great protection. He does, knowing he's going to get hit. So I think, again, you're right. Both you guys are right. I think that those are concerns, and those are things that, you'll see how they translate to the NFL level, because in the NFL, he's not going to get, dropping 8 on 1st down like he did at Colorado.
Well, yeah, and obviously you would hope that, if the Browns are going to take him number 2, you're building this nice little kind of nest around him, building in this cockpit that he can work in. And you have a pretty good offensive line. There are some questions, especially at left tackle. You've got at least one good receiver. You think you're going to add another 1 or 2 in this draft, fix the running game. I mean, again, I know that kind of goes against the idea of, well, a guy has to of fit necessarily, but like that's all part of it. You're bringing him into a situation where I think if he were going somewhere where there was no line and just no, a new coach, a bad offense, all of that, I think the Browns can bring him in and coach some of that stuff out of him and deal with some of those mistakes and some of those flaws while they try to fix it and have him out on the field.
Well, and you're going to go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, it helps when you have at least one more year of Joel Bitonio out there, and
exactly
along with Wyatt Teller and Ethan Posick. The gap between, the best defensive line and the worst offensive line in the NFL, so much smaller than that between the best D line and the worst O line in the FBS. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm with you. And, it's the idea of knowing where he's going to set up is big. This is going to sound very coachy, but play really good defense, run the ball on 1st down, get it to manageable stuff. You can help that quarterback out. If you don't want the quarterback to carry the load, which I don't think most coordinators don't have a guy that can carry the load, then you got to play defense. You got to not turn the ball over. You got to create turnovers. You got to end every drive in a kick. You have to be boring, and boring's okay. Boring wins games, and be fundamentally sound. Don't jump off sides. All those things that they can control that they struggled with last year, that's what they need to work on. Because you get it to 2nd 4, I think Shedeur Sanders can be very successful, because the defense is going to give you a true look. They're going to give you 4 or 5 down linemen. They're going to give you 2 or 3 linebackers. They're going to give you a 1 or 2 high shell. When you have to throw it every time, they can be tricky up front, and that's where protection issues happen, things like that. So I think, like you're saying, Dan, the nest they're building, that is going to be beneficial. And whoever is a quarterback, they got to run the ball better, and they got to not turn the ball over and not be silly.
Okay, so we spent about 25 minutes on these 2 guys, and I want to get into the other quarterbacks here because, like I said, somebody mentioned Jackson Dart in the chat, and I want to talk about some of these other guys the Browns could look at if they go a different direction. But I do just want to ask you guys this right now. Browns on the clock at 2. Cam Ward goes to the Titans. Is Shedeur Sanders your pick at 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're all on board with that. That's kind of boring, but we're going to do a mock draft here in this show a little bit later, share the screen, show you guys all that stuff. So you'll be able to check that out. And what we're actually going to do is I figured this out today. So today we are going to take Shedeur number 2, but then next week when we're talking, I think it's pass catchers next week, playmakers next week, I'm going to make you guys take Travis Hunter number 2. And then the following week, I'm going to make you take Abdul Carter number 2. So we'll do like 3 very different looking mock drafts here as we go through this process over the next 3 weeks. So not going to take a break here on the YouTube because we can't. But on the podcast, we are going to take a break. Before we do that, I want everybody to do me a favor. We've got socials here on the Orange and Brown Talk. So head over to Instagram, find us, just look for Orange and Brown Talk. Head over to Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it nowadays, Orange Brown Talk. There's no and in there. It's just Orange Brown Talk. Give us a follow there. And then, of course, a lot of you are watching this on YouTube right now, but if you're listening on the pod, make sure you go find our YouTube channel. It's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Quick break. When we come back, we'll look at the second tier of quarterbacks. And we're back here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Lobby, Tim Bielik, Lance Reisland. I told you guys about Tim. I didn't tell you about Lance. He played quarterback at Kent State, coached at Garfield Heights. Our film guy does a lot of film work for us on the site. So if you're sitting here like, who is this Lance Reisland? I remember a guy who was slinging the ball around at Dick's Stadium. I don't know. How many years ago? We won't talk about how many years ago, Lance.
No, a long time ago.
I remember that name. That's Lance Reisland. Okay, let's get into these other quarterbacks. And I think maybe the most divisive quarterback probably on this pod with the 3 of us, and maybe just in general, is Jackson Dart. A lot of people very high on Jackson Dart, getting a lot of first round buzz. I don't know that you guys are in the same boat. Now, I like Jackson Dart. I would certainly not take him at number 2. I want to make that abundantly clear. I like Jackson Dart, but I want to hear your guys' cases. I guess I want to hear your guys' thoughts on him first. Tim, why don't you go ahead?
Well, if you saw cleveland.com on St. Patrick's Day, or for you football insiders that got this a little earlier, I wrote about the stat about Jackson Dart that really had me extremely concerned. And when we talked a couple months ago, I said when I watched him, I just couldn't really fall in love with him. And I think I found the problem with Jackson Dart is fourth quarter numbers aren't great. Looking at some of the numbers, this is according to CFBstats.com, quarterback rating in the fourth quarter. He ranked 42nd last season among qualified quarterbacks in the fourth quarter. Now, I'll make it clear. If you're looking at it and you see 151.77, you must think that's amazing. College quarterback rating is calculated completely differently than the NFL. That number goes all the way up to, I think, 1,176, if I remember right. I think that's only according to Wikipedia. I never found like the actual number, so I never put that in my story. But Jackson Dart last season, 42nd in college football in fourth quarter rating. To compare that around, Cam Ward was 6th. Shadur Sanders, 32nd. Jalen Milroe, 45th. We'll talk about Jalen Milroe and why that number means nothing to me. I'll get to that in a later. But even comparing it further in the draft years, Jane Daniels, his draft season when he won the Heisman, number 1 in fourth quarter quarterback rating is 247.02. Was phenomenal. So Jackson Dart, this season, the fourth quarter, not really good. I made sure to watch a couple games in particular. The Kentucky game really stood out to me because there's a sequence where he threw a low pass on a third down to Trey Harris, who is a day 2 receiver, and he did his best to try and get under that football, just couldn't quite do it. Bork, that next play, throws a heave to his tight end, Caden Prescourt, who, full credit, that was probably the most impressive throw I've ever seen Jackson Dart make. It was just a perfect jump ball to his tight end. But then second down, just outside field goal range, scrambles to his left. And this is with about a minute and change to go. Scrambling to his left, keeps going, gets sacked from behind, and pretty much forces Ole Miss to burn a timeout. The very next play, and I want to preface this, he gets bailed out by a penalty. He's running to his left, crosses the line of scrimmage. He gets hit. The ball pops free. Kentucky recovers the fumble. And of course, the penalty was offside, so it didn't mean anything. So got them 5 yards closer. Then on 3rd and 9, and from there it would have been about a 50-yard field goal. He throws a 2-yard check down to his running back, Henry Parrish, sets up a 48-yard field goal that would tie the game, and the kicker pulls it way wide to the left. He might have missed the kicking net on that play. Ole Miss loses. LSU, better, I think. But on back-to-back plays in overtime on I think it's 2nd and 25 and 3rd and 25, he threw deep balls over the middle that were touched a combined 3 times by LSU defenders, none of them by his own guys. One of them, I think he just lobbed off his back foot, and it did not look good at all. Ole Miss ends up losing the game, even though their kicker hit from 57. But the Florida game, the Florida game where he throws 2 picks in the final. I believe it's a minute 40 of the game. Technically, there was a third, but that one got overturned by replay, and then he came right back and threw an interception the very next play. I'm not, that's very concerning in the NFL when so many games, as you guys know, come down to those final 2 minutes. You got to find a way to make a play. And I even wrote about this. The Browns are were in a situation where one of the reasons that they moved on from Baker Mayfield was he had issues in the clutch. I mean, 2021, I think it was 4 times he had chances to either tie or win the game, and either through his own mistakes or things that happened, he couldn't get it done. It's a difficult ask, but I thought about it. Coming through in those situations, it's an uncommon ask that requires an uncommon person. So that's why I think with Jackson Dart, with those issues, considering what the Browns just moved on from, for me, I don't like the fit there. And those fourth quarter concerns really have me concerned. And it's not quite a do not draft thing, but I would have serious trepidation about Jackson Dart because I don't know if you can become a guy who becomes clutch. I don't know if maybe there's some instances of that, but I don't know if you can bank on that if you're evaluating him.
Okay, there we go. So, my first impressions of Jackson Dart were he's just very hot and cold. Lance, I know we texted about that a little bit. Tim, I think you said something. I think I saw you tweet something at some point during this draft season where when you watch Jackson Dart, you feel like you just want a little bit more. Like there's just something that's not, it just leaves you kind of wanting more out of him. I feel that too. That being said, I'm going to put this take out there. And this is very much a, how was the play Mrs. Lincoln take? The Florida game was bad, right? The ending of the Florida game was really bad. If you take, though, I'll just say this. If you take out the first throw where he almost gets a guy killed, and you take out that last 2 minutes or whatever where he just kept throwing the ball to Florida, he actually made some pretty good throws in that game. And he did it with Trey Harris out for much of that game. There was also a dropped back shoulder that could have been a touchdown and a dropped deep ball that could have been a touchdown, I think in the fourth quarter. I'm not doing a great sell job on Jackson Dart because everybody's going to say like, yeah, Dan, how did that game end? How'd that game finish? But I guess the point I'm making here, Lance, is even in his worst game, what I think people universally say was his worst game, it did feel like there was something there. And the guy's 21 years old. Now, he has played a lot of football for a 21-year-old, but I think he's the youngest quarterback in this draft. He's 21 years old. It seems like there's room to grow there. Look, Sam Darnold is a guy that was super young when he came in, and we all ignored these turnover issues and things like that. So maybe I'm doing the same thing here with Jackson Dart. But I do think there's something there. I'm not saying first round something. I'm not saying he's definitely your franchise quarterback if you take him something. I think there's something there.
Well, my concerns, it's funny. First of all, I love hearing that stuff. It's because you try to watch the film and you just try to grab the whole picture, right? Just like you're saying, there were some great throws in the Florida game. My concern, one is playing for Lane Kiffin is makes him hot and cold, like you and I talked about. And the reason why is that my concerns are with him in, first of all, he has all the measurables. I think that's why, he's big, he's strong, he's fast, he can do all those things. He's got a lot of attitude with him. He's got a lot of swag with him, all that kind of stuff people like to say now. So he has all that. The thing that concerns me is his feet in the pocket, and he's not really good in the pocket in terms of straight drop back. Now, with Lane Kiffin, Lane Kiffin is a brilliant offensive mind in terms of RPOs and what defenses are trying to do to him. But what that does is that, for me, it does two things. One is he throws a great deep ball, but a lot of times at when you're at Ole Miss, those are one read things. You're reading the half safety. In the NFL, you got to read a lot of different levels from safeties to corners to blitzes, et cetera. You're checking in and out of stuff. So that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is his footwork within the pocket when he's just on a straight 3, 5, 7-step drop. When he has to do it over and over, he's not very good. Consistent, let me say that. Not he's good, he's just not consistent. So my concerns are more with his fundamentals, the things that, how much can you process? I started looking into that last year when we started looking at quarterbacks, listening to you two guys talk about, different things. I try to be a lifelong learner. So this year I really try to look at what do these guys have to read? What do these guys have to process? And when you're playing for Lane Kiffin, you don't have to process a lot. And don't get me wrong, it's not, you're not dropping back and throwing it to Trey Harris. But in terms of like an RPO, you're reading a front side backer. Does he come, pull it, throw the slant? Is it a deep post? You read the half safety. If he comes down, you pull it and throw the post. Not that those aren't reads, they are reads, but in the NFL, you have a lot of layers, a lot of levels. So how much he has to read concerns me. Obviously, the making plays in the fourth quarter concerns me. But you're right. He's a young kid, and only takes one guy to like him. It doesn't take 32. It takes one guy. So he has the type of tools that you go, yeah, this guy has some ability worth bringing into camp. There's no one that I've evaluated the last couple of years that's as hot and cold as Jackson Dart. I mean, there's times he makes throws that wow you, and then there's throws against Florida. You're like, what are you looking at? Right. So, yeah, I see both sides of it. But yeah, there are some things there that a coach in the NFL will go, I can work with that, because the things he has, you can't teach.
And I would be concerned. I would be concerned, Tim, if he got drafted too high, right? If somebody does, and it could happen, like he could go in the first round, but if he got drafted to a place where he had to come in and play right away and be like the team's franchise quarterback right away. I keep throwing out this scenario where the Rams, it's at the end of the first round, Sean McVay goes knocking on Les Snead's door and is like, hey, I need somebody. Every year we're doing this thing with Matthew Stafford. He's like 100 years old. We got to find our next quarterback because I'm not tanking. So if we got a chance to get a guy, let's get a guy. And that's where a guy like, could they take a Jackson Dart and sit him for a year behind Matthew Stafford? Or we're going to talk about Tyler Shough here in a little bit. Could they take a guy like that and sit him behind Matthew Stafford? I'm really intrigued by if something like that would happen. But I do think the worst thing that could happen to Jackson Dart is to go too high to a team that has to play him right away.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if that fit would work, but I think, could you imagine a better fit for a guy like Jackson Dart than with Sean McVay, especially behind a guy, quarterback of Matthew Stafford, who's got a Super Bowl, probably a Hall of Famer, potentially. And I think it does come down to the complexity of the offense that he had in Ole Miss, or I guess in your case, basically, you're talking about, Lance, maybe a lack thereof as far as, what you're reading out there. And those were concerns about Dart. And I do want to be fair to Jackson Dart here. I don't want to make it sound like I think he's a 5th round prospect. I don't think he is. When it comes to draft guys, I always try to look at the appeal and why people like a certain guy. And with Jackson Dart, I see it. He looks like the prototype that you're looking for in the modern dual threat quarterback. Accuracy, the arm strength is pretty good. He's mobile. He's more mobile than I thought he was. And watching him more and more, really diving into those things. But and especially in the first 3 quarters of the game, Daniel, like you were talking about, first 3 quarters, he's really good. I think it's just maybe if a team can figure out how to channel first through third quarter Jackson Dart into the fourth quarter, then you have something. But I think you really need to have a real, like with Cam Ward, I think you need to have a good infrastructure in place to help develop that with Jackson Dart. I think he needs time to really learn the complexity of the offense. And as we'll get to later, with another quarterback we're going to talk about soon, repetitive fundamentals.
Yeah,
Okay,
go back and look at those. It's funny you guys say that. Go back and watch his throws. Watch how fundamentally poor he is in the fourth quarter. That's the real thing you see, is his footwork is really, really poor. He relies on that arm too much. It's a really good point by you guys. That's concerning, but that's fixable.
Yeah,
okay, Lance. Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry to interrupt again. But when you said that, I thought that second throw against LSU and in that third down throw I'm talking about against LSU, I think they just completely lobbed it off his back foot, and that's why he kind of underthrew it. Sorry to interrupt again.
No, that's fine. Okay, I'm about to put a comment here on our screen, and then Lance, I'm going to let you talk. This comes from Joshua. He is saying, I'm saying a heck no to Tyler Shough. I would take Kyle McCord, Quinn Ewers, or Will Howard before him. Lance, you are a fan of Shough. I have watched, I think I've probably watched 5 or 6 of his games at this point. I actually just watched one again today. I watched the Stanford game today just to kind of refresh myself on him. I hadn't watched him for a little while. Again, with a lot of these guys, I know I've said this about a lot of these guys. I see why people see something in him. I see why he's coming up the draft boards. And just like with all these guys, I have real concerns about how some of it might translate to the NFL. But you are the Tyler Shough guy. You threatened to wear his jersey here on this podcast, so we're going to let you lead us into the Tyler Shough discussion.
I did. I'll be on the mountain with Tyler and Dylan Gabriel. I'll be on that mountain by myself. But Tyler Shough, I love Tyler Shough. The film So when I watch the combine, and I look at numbers, that all goes back to the film then. So Tyler Shough, I wasn't huge on. I thought he was a mid-round pick. He's 25 years old, so he's older, and that seems to throw a lot of people off. But for me, it doesn't. So when you look at him, he does everything well, and he's a really good athlete. He's super tough. He's got an attitude. He did a ton of things. He makes a ton of those things I was talking about with Jackson Dart. He does a ton of multi-level reads, throwing the ball, great anticipation, great accuracy. Especially on those, the chunk ball. That's what I wanted to see out of Will Howard, which I thought he did a good job too. But Shough can make those 15 to 25-yard digs, comebacks, bang eights, those things that you see in the NFL all the time. Great fundamentals. He's a structure guy. I like that he's a quarterback that has great movement within the pocket. So he can, the lineman is going to know where he's at, but he can slide up. He does a really good job of sliding up a step or sliding back a step or sliding to his right and left. I thought the combine, he did a great job. His footwork was really good at the combine. He played in a system where he was in the gun, he was underneath center, he ran zone, he ran gap, he had he had to kill plays, they had multiple run plays. I think he's NFL ready. I think being older, having all those reps, all those games, I think it's huge. And that shows my age more than how long ago I played quarterback. But I'm a big Bill Parcells fan, and they got to see stuff. And these guys, Tyler Shough had seen all the looks that you're going to see. Now in the NFL, you're going to get better athletes. You're going to get some differences in some coverages and things like that. But for the most part, he's seen a lot of these things that he will see on Sunday. And he's tough. He's highly accurate. He's highly cognitive. My jersey didn't come in, but I would have worn that tonight because I'm a big Tyler Shough fan for sure.
And Tim, I'll say this too. He didn't get much help from his receivers at Louisville. A lot of drops. I mean, there's times when you're sitting there watching him like, do these guys ever catch the football? I looked it up on PFF. They have Ja'Cory Brooks with 7 drops this season. His Pats catchers overall, his receivers overall had 24 drops on the year. That's a lot. That's a lot of drops. So he at times did not get much help from his receivers. So I actually don't think I've really heard your thoughts on him. So what do you think of him?
Well, I mean, as much as you say he didn't have help at receiver, he had help from. If you remember when I was on Buckeye Talk all the way back in those 7 years, about 8 years ago, I was a big Jeff Brom guy. His coach at Louisville, Jeff Brom, he's my guy. I love Jeff Brom's offenses. And I did really watch. I've been kind of trying to watch a little more Tyler Shough. The one game I really watched closely was against Boston College. He really struggled early off in that game. I think they were down about 20-0. I usually just pulled up the box score on my second computer over here. 20-0, middle of the second quarter. Then he started to get hot, started to make some completions, started to make some good throws. And you see the maybe kind of a gunslinger mentality with Tyler Shough. And it's weird to say gunslinger mentality when you have about a 4-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last season in Louisville. But I think you see some steadiness that, even though things didn't go great in the beginning, he was able to rally his team back, find a way to win on the road. I know Boston College isn't a world beater, but BC made a bowl game. They went into Florida State early in the season. We all still thought the Seminoles were good and beat them. So this was a pretty good win for Louisville. And I think with Tyler Shough, he has the size you look for, about 6'5", almost 220 pounds, more mobile than you expect. And I know I've seen a bunch of comments be like, he's 26 years old. I don't think this is a Brandon Weeden type of situation because this is a guy who's been in college football for 7 seasons. The fact that he's been around all these couple of years, been on a whole bunch of different offensive systems throughout his career, I think that's a beneficial thing. Scott over there in the comments talking about the injury history. I'm not as concerned because I remember watching the 2023 draft and Booger McFarland when talking about Bryce Young, basically saying every quarterback is going to get injured at some point in their career. So that's not as big a concern for me. It's what is interesting with Tyler Shough, and I'm actually just pulling up his stats right now. I actually included this when I talked about my quarterbacks and my rankings. He's been in college football for 7 years, but he has thrown 951 passes in his career. Sounds great, but in Shedeur Sanders' last 2 seasons, 907 passes, and that's not including the numbers he threw at Jackson State. So yeah, Shough's been around the block. Yeah, there's a lot of great tools with, but still, I feel like needs maybe a little more seasoning. That said, I do get the appeal of Tyler Shough. I'm higher on him than I am on Jackson Dart. The age does worry me a little bit. Limited sample size worries me a little bit. But if you're looking at just pure tools, there's plenty of good things to like about him.
Yeah. So I think that here's my issue, Lance. So like Tim said, Tim saying he thinks he maybe still needs a little more seasoning. And I think, and again, part of this is because the game is fresh in my mind, but I've noticed it in other games too. There are some moments with him where it's kind of like, what were you doing here? There's one really egregious one against Stanford that should have been intercepted, but also then there's like 3 throws that were, oh my God, I can't believe that. So it's a mixed bag. And my concern is if I'm drafting a 25-year-old who's going to be 26 in September, I really need that guy to be I need him to be finished product. You are the guy. We're starting you week 1, and we can't have these moments where it's like, he's not Brandon Weeden, but I'll never forget when Brandon Weeden came out, someone was saying, like, I got worried about Brandon Weeden when he was having trouble with pressure at the Senior Bowl. Like when you notice things like that, especially with an older prospect, that concerns me. I don't want to have the what exactly were you doing here moments. If I have those with Jackson Dart, he's 21, and I feel like there's still room for him to grow. If I have him with Tyler Shough, this guy's going to be 26 in September. I need you to be rock solid.
Well, I will say this. The one thing, being a film guy and loving to watch offenses, first of all, Tim's actually right. Braum, the reason he only has 900 throws is because there's a lot of run checks that he has, right? So he's going to get you into the right run play, which is really important in the NFL because you're always in charge of getting the offense into the right play. So that's going to help him because Braum, I'm with you. I'm a huge Braum fan in terms of what he teaches the quarterback. The other thing about going back to Weeden as compared to him that I think will help people understand is that Weeden came from Oklahoma State where he never took a snap from any center and was very half side. So he did a lot of half reads. When you're a no huddle, fast pace, light your hair on fire, you're only reading certain things. So that's part of the problem with Weeden when he came in is that not only was he older, but he was only in the gun. He was only reading half the field and he had very simple reads because that's what those, a lot of times, like Tim was saying with Shedeur, when you get the ball out fast, it's because you're a no-huddle team. You got multiple receivers on the thing, and you're just trying to find where they're not. You're trying to find a lot of these offense. Like I've been at a million clinics where they're say, we're not running routes. We're finding green grass. And there's a lot of concepts like that in college where they're just finding green grass, sit down and go. That doesn't happen in the NFL. So, Shough is going to have a lot more experience. Now, the ages, when you guys say that, that's a for sure concern, and especially if he needs that. But I think a lot of that polishing comes with footwork. A lot of that polishing comes with what are you seeing? I think he understands that. He sees what coverage is. He sees the hi-hats, who's coming, who's hot, who's not hot, multiple sets. Browns are one of the few guys, 13 personnel, 12 personnel, 10 personnel. So he's seen all that. I think the learning curve won't be as much because his footwork's going to be really good from underneath center and in the gun. And he's going to understand what the defenses are doing a little bit better than Brandon Weeden when he came in.
Okay, let's we could spend an hour on all of these guys, but there's one other guy that I think we really need to talk about, and then I'm going to throw it open to you guys to throw out like another favorite or two that you might have as we go along. But we need to talk about, again, another very divisive prospect. I think what's happening with this guy is what I thought would happen, and that is the farther we're getting away from actual football, the more this guy's stock is maybe starting to rise as people think about what can be capable. So let me throw out this comment here from our chat going on right now on the live stream. PFF says Jalen Milroe is the most physically gifted quarterback, but too inconsistent in his passing delivery. That tracks with what I watched at Alabama. If you search around enough and find those Alabama message boards, who knows what else you'll find on there, but you will find them. Not too sad that the Jalen Milroe era is over at Alabama. There is a connection with the Browns. Tommy Rees was his coordinator for a year last year in 2023. I said this on our pod. I think it was yesterday's podcast, our Hey Mary Kay edition of the pod. I am not a big Jalen Milroe fan. I've never been. I see the athleticism. I see the non-quarterback things in Jalen Milroe. That said, I try to be clean slate when these guys get to the NFL. Like, I'm not going to be the guy that's sitting there saying, you're an idiot if you pick Jalen Milroe, or, oh, man, I can't believe those guys did that. Because who knows? This guy 2 years from now, I don't know I don't think it'll happen, but 2-3 years from now, maybe he has harnessed that athleticism and combined it. Maybe he's gotten better as a passer and he's turned into a Jalen Hurts type. Or I think Lamar Jackson is too high of a bar. That you're talking about a future Hall of Famer there. So I think that's too high of a bar, but I don't know. To me, Tim, in a world where we have seen, I mean, people thought it was crazy that Jalen Hurts could ever be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And he just won a Super Bowl. And I think in both the Super Bowls he played in, he was the best quarterback on the field in those games. He's got his flaws. You watch him all 17 weeks. There's some stuff that's going to drive you crazy, but Philly figured it out with him. Is there a world where it works with Jalen Milroe?
I think so. And I'm never going to be afraid to say I screwed up with Jalen Hurts. I got that way wrong. I guess I underestimated this 2019 season he had with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma and what that did for him. But with Jalen Milroe, for me, why he's my QB3 in this class, it comes down to a simple idea for me. How are you that good with the deep ball, but somehow down the rest of the field, you're not as good? I feel like that's maybe I've never played quarterback. Lance could probably help me out with this, but I feel like the hardest thing to do is be as good with the deep ball as Jalen Milroe is. And that leads me to my point of the idea of if you're that good with a deep ball, then that tells me there's something wrong with how you're working the intermediate and short areas. And it feels like it's all fundamental. Like the idea that I talked about this with Jackson Dart, when you said inconsistent fundamentals, I immediately thought Jalen Milroe, because when you watch the deep ball, it's a thing of beauty. I mean, I think of the Georgia game when he had that gorgeous deep ball in the final minutes to Ryan Williams to help them win that game. That was probably the game of the year in college football. It's there with Jalen Milroe. Those things are there. It just comes down to, can you nail down those important details every single time? Can you be as fundamentally sound throwing that 60-yard ball to Ryan Williams as you are throwing a 2-yard check down pass to your tight end or something like that, or a dump off to your running back? Can you be that consistent? So I feel like that's coaching. If you can basically tell Jalen, hey, why, if you're doing all these certain things right, throwing the ball 60 yards, why can't you just do this 3 or 4 yards? And that seems like something he's going to work on. Tommy Rees being his offensive coordinator, Dan, you pointing out, that's important, I think, in my mind, because he understands, what Jalen was able to do in 2023 that really helped him kind of burst onto the scene. What hurt for me in 2024, he didn't have quite the season I thought he was going to have. I thought he would take off in a maybe more quarterback-friendly offense that Kalen DeBoer ran at Alabama. That didn't quite come to fruition. And one of the games they lost, Vanderbilt, that was not on the offense. They put up 40-plus points. It was their defense kind of let them down. The Oklahoma game concerning. The Michigan Bowl game, very concerning, although I remember watching that game, that it was basically a monsoon that enveloped in the middle of the game. That I'm not going to blame him for one of those fumbles. I mean, it was pouring on him. He basically just turned the fire hose on Jalen Milroe. And of course, the ball is going to come out in that situation. Obviously, smaller hand size, I think, is a concern. The fact that he didn't take the leap you would want to take as a passer is a little concerning, but it seems like he's a guy that really is going to put the work in. The intangibles seem like they're really great with Jalen Milroe. And I didn't even talk about the running ability. For me, it's somewhere between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. And that's a trait I'm willing to take a chance on, that if you have the deep ball, if you have that incredible running ability, that sit him for all 2025 or as much of 2025 as possible and see if you can work on that game 20 yards and in.
Yeah. And I think too, over the years, there was the thinking that there's certain things you can't teach at the NFL level, like accuracy, like you're either accurate or you're not, or this and that. And I think we've seen, as the NFL has become more open-minded and more open to college concepts, college coaches, younger coaches. Josh Allen's a great example of this, right? I think Jalen Hurts is a really good example of this. Guys who maybe weren't super accurate in college. Lamar Jackson. Now, I think Lamar Jackson was more dynamic as a thrower and a runner in college, to like that combination. And obviously we've seen what he's done in the NFL, but he wasn't a great thrower when he first got into the NFL. He's developed that over time. You can teach this stuff, especially if it's things like footwork and it's things like cleaning that up. You can teach that stuff. And Lance, somebody's going to look at that 4.37 40 time and think, oh, That's going to be my 11th guy the defenses have to think about now. So now they got to think about my receivers and my running backs. And now they have to think about this quarterback that can run a 4.37. Okay, maybe there are some throws that he's not great at. Maybe there are some things he needs to get better at. But good luck chasing this guy down if he finds a seam or he gets out in the open field. Like, somebody's going to take a chance on him. And if he lands in the right spot, it very well might work. What do you think of Milroe?
Well, I like Jalen Milroe, but your concerns that you guys have, they're there. The couple things that, you guys are talking about, first of all, with accuracy. Accuracy comes, a lot of quarterbacks who are inaccurate is because they don't understand what they're seeing. So when they don't understand what they're seeing, their feet aren't right. Now, some quarterbacks can make throws without their feet right. Very few can, especially in that chunk range, that 15 to 25 range. So if you understand where you're going with the football, it makes it a lot easier to anticipate and be accurate because your feet are right. Because you're saying, so Tim, you're saying a check down, for example. So if you're dropping, if it's 3rd and 9 and you drop, you see all the time where an NFL guy will check it down. The key to a check down is making sure it's a catchable run after catch ball so the guy can get it in space because they're dropping. But to throw an accurate ball, your feet have to be right. But your feet aren't going to be right unless you see that they're dropping. It all kind of correlates. So that's what I see with Jalen Milroe. His feet don't match his what he's seeing. I think it will because when you talk about the deep ball. Now, some of those intermediate throws are the hardest throws. And Tim, going back to what you said, a lot of quarterbacks will tell you the gifted ones, which I wasn't one of those guys, but the deep ball is actually almost sometimes the easiest one because it gives you wiggle room both left and right. You can underthrow it a little bit. You can do some things. You don't have to be quite as accurate and you make that initial read and like we all get excited as quarterbacks, safety comes down, you throw it over the top. But sometimes those intermediate ones, they take knowledge in your brain and that knowledge has to translate to your feet. And if you're Patrick Mahomes, fine, you throw it sidearms out there. But for the most, that other 99 guys out of 100, their feet have to be right. And when I watch Milroe, his feet aren't right. And a lot of it has to come with but going back to Jalen Hurts, there's a classic example of a guy you tailed it a little bit to what he can do. You improved him in the pocket. You didn't make him do things that he wasn't comfortable doing. He's a quarterback you won with. You punted the ball. You played good defense. You ran the ball really well. You got him in some good down and distances. He delivered when he needed to deliver. But there's a quarterback, you surround him with guys and you surround him with a scheme that fits. You're right. You're right, Dan. Those measurables at 4.3, you guys said it best. Somebody will take a chance on him, but you better understand his weaknesses and you better be able to fix those. But you're right. If he can get his feet right, he can make all the throws. He can do it. He just hasn't done it consistently. But I was wrong. Jalen Hurts, I was right on. I was actually really, really wrong on Lamar Jackson, to be honest with you, because I didn't think he could be the thrower that he is now. So, Tim, I'll double down on you. You were wrong on Hurts. I was way wrong on Lamar Jackson because what he's done kind of gives me hope for a guy like Milroe because I think Milroe can make it if he gets in that right scheme.
It's okay, Lance. I watched.
I'm going to put myself out there.
No,
it is what it is.
First of all, everybody was wrong about Lamar Jackson. The Ravens passed on Lamar Jackson once before they actually drafted him. So let's not go too crazy there. I might have had some Patrick Mahomes takes back in 2017. So
ooh.
We'll just
you trumped us all there. Good. I like it.
I was one of the people who wasn't quite sure what I was seeing with Patrick Mahomes. So I guess everybody out there listening, take whatever I say with a grain of salt. That's why I let these guys do the evaluating. Okay, so I do want to get to the mock draft. I want to get another break in, but before we do that, I gotta hear. Give me like one quarterback from each of you that you really want to talk about. And if there's one guy that we leave out, there is one person we have to talk about, this being a Cleveland / Ohio based podcast. If we don't get to him, I'll bring him up and we'll spend a little bit of time on him at least. But Tim, give me the one quarterback we have not talked about that you really love in this draft.
All right. I want to preface this. Ohio State fans out there, don't get mad at me for this one. I'm going to say Kyle McCord. And I get some of the issues with Kyle McCord. We all watched the game against Michigan at the end when he had a chance to win and then threw the interception in the final 2 minutes of the game. And at times did not look like he was necessarily ready. Like he had a hard time at times dealing with the pressure of playing at Ohio State. But I go back to what I said at the beginning when it comes to the number one thing I think of with quarterbacks. can you elevate the talent around you? And with Kyle McCord, I think the answer in 2024 was yes, because you have to remember Syracuse the year before fired Dino Babers. They were a 6-7 football team last season. In 2024, with McCord there, with new coach Fran Brown there, Syracuse won 10 games. And we also have to remember, one of the concerns I had with Cam Ward, we talked about it in February, was I was concerned about his November performances, the loss at Georgia Tech, and in the game when Miami lost to Syracuse, a must-win game to get the Canes into the ACC championship game and basically clinch a playoff spot. Kyle McCord actually outdueled him. McCord throws for 380, 3 touchdowns. Cam Ward 349 and 2 touchdowns. And McCord did this despite being down 21-0 early in the second quarter. Now, there's things wrong with McCord's game. Yeah, he threw 12 interceptions last season. That's a lot. He threw 34 touchdowns. So that's less than a 3-to-1 turnover to interception ratio. There's a reason he's going to be a day 3 guy. I'm not going to sit here and say Kyle McCord in no universe should be going in the first 2 rounds. If you want to talk me into the 3rd round, I will listen to that conversation. But with Kyle McCord, rewatching that Syracuse Miami game, he looked like a completely different guy than I remember him being at Ohio State. He looked decisive. He looked like he knew where he was going with the football. He put it on the money. And you don't just throw for almost about 4,800 yards by accident. I think he had a great system in Syracuse. And I think there's something to be said for, having played at Ohio State, understanding the pressure that going to Syracuse and taking a mid-tier program and bringing them up to be successful in 2024 and making them kind of an it program. Maybe not an it program, but one to keep an eye on going forward. And Kyle McCord deserves full credit. And there's, of course, the St. Joseph's prep connection with Kevin Stefanski in there. That shouldn't weigh in anything, but I mean, if it couldn't hurt, honestly. So, I mean, day 3 quarterbacks are all basically lottery tickets. So why not take a chance on a guy who has clearly taken a program and pushed it up to a different level than it was when he got there?
Yeah, I mean, look, really cool story. Obviously, a guy that didn't work out for at Ohio State. They decided to move on. He goes to Syracuse, and now he's a guy that is going to get drafted, Lance. I think that's cool. That's exciting. Whatever you think of Kyle McCord, good for him.
Well, you talk about what the Browns, you talk about within structure, you talk about what Kevin Stefanski likes to do. If they don't take a quarterback, then for me, a guy like Kyle McCord becomes an option on day 2 and 3, really, because of what the offense allows you to hide your deficiencies, because you're not asked to be the guy, you're asked to be the facilitator. So when you're in a structured offense, and all of us who are coaches, we're in more structured offense when you have a quarterback that can't play without structure. And so for him, I just think if he can get in the right offense, the Browns would be a great example of that. He could be a guy, understand the system, but he can make all the throws. He doesn't work well off schedule. Okay. That's not what this offense is. That's not what the Browns like to do. That's not what a number of the offenses in the NFL are. So again, a guy with the right system, threw for a lot of yards, drives the ball very well, doesn't improvise very well, doesn't have great feet. You don't need great feet in this offense. You need to be able to make good decisions, get rid of the football, get him in the right run game, etc. So yeah, I think he's a talented guy, a guy who fought through some stuff, going from Ohio State to Syracuse.
I would also say with McCord, and I'm not saying McCord will or won't be a starter, but with some of these day 3 guys, I think the best advice for them would be, hey, look at the career a guy like Colt McCoy had in the NFL. Look at a career that Ryan Fitzpatrick had. Look at some of these guys who maybe bounced. Some of them were career backups. Some of them kind of bounced back and forth between being starters and backups. But if you're willing to be one of those guys, you can have a very long. Case Keenum. I saw we got a tweet during this podcast that Case Keenum just signed a contract. I think in Chicago. Maybe I'm wrong about where he signed. I just glanced at it, but he just signed a contract. So if you can just come in and do your job and be really good when your number gets called and just do what you're supposed to do, you're going to have a very long, lucrative career in the NFL. Lance, I already know who you're going to talk about. Go ahead.
Dillon Gabriel, without question. And I will. Again, going back to what Tim said, he threw for 18,000 yards and 155 touchdowns in college. Now, a lot of it. So once again, this is a guy who's 6 foot. There's some durability issues. I understand that, but I've seen him at Central Florida. I've seen him, was a lot of RPO, with Gus Malzahn. I've seen him, when he was at Oklahoma and then at Oregon. So he's been in a bunch of different schemes. He knows he can play from underneath center. He can play in the gun. Once again, he threw for 18,000 yards, and that doesn't happen on accident either. And he did it against high-level competition, raised the Central Florida program up, I thought, incredibly. Just a really good player. Now, being only 6 foot, and obviously you guys know as well, the thing that I've learned, even being around football all my life, now that I get the incredible opportunity to go down and watch practice and be standing right next to these guys, it's hard to survive in that league if you don't have size. It's just that's the reality of it. A lot of these guys that I've seen at practice who can, good players, great players in college, you can tell the size hurts them when they get to the NFL. So there's an issue there. But the idea, I'm going to throw this out to you. The Rams offense, this West Coast motion, the motion dictates what coverage you see. You get rid of the football super fast. You throw in lanes. You don't throw over top. It's all timing. Think about Tua. Think about, obviously, Stafford gives you a little bit more, but think about Tua in terms of not being a lefty, but just the timing of how he does stuff. That's what I see Dillon Gabriel. And going back to what you said, Dan, what you said, I think that's important in terms of what is your worth. And if you're a quarterback that understands, it's nice for a quarterback with a starter. So if he's not a starter, can you come off and can your guy that you're with, your position group, can they help you see things? And those are important guys. That's why Case Keenum's around and Colt McCoy's around, because they understand the game. This is a guy that has a ton of starts. I'm telling you, the right scheme. They talk about the combine meant nothing. He threw some good balls at the combine and threw some terrible ones at the combine. But this is a guy I'm super high on. One of my favorite breakdowns. I'm not saying he's a day one guy, but he's probably my day 3 favorite guy because of production. He can just make plays. He throws the ball so well. He can drive it. He drives it well deep. I'm big on Dillon Gabriel. A lot of people aren't, and I'm probably as higher on him than anybody. But I'm a big believer in him. I have him up there with some of the guys that we've talked about in terms of what I think he can be down the line. I really do. I think he's a super talent in a West Coast, get the ball out quick kind of scheme, easy reads, get it out. I think he can be very productive.
I think he's an impressive player. I mean, when I've watched him, first of all, I love their running back. We're going to get to him in a next week. I'll pound the table for him, even with his testing numbers. But you see the ability to run an offense with Dillon Gabriel. But of course, the thing you're doing is you're betting on an outlier. Now, I don't think you're taking him to start. I don't think anybody's taking him to start. He's going to be a day 3 guy. So, this isn't Bryce Young going number 1 overall where you're really betting on an outlier. But if you're taking him with the idea that he would be a starter, there aren't a lot of guys at his size that have been successful. And Tim, he is an older prospect. He's played, he was teammates with, I'm thinking of somebody else, but he is an older prospect. He's played a lot of college football. So there are some things against him, but none of them really have to do with him as a football player necessarily.
Well, first, before I talk football, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Mililani, Hawaii, the birthplace of Dillon Gabriel, because my sister-in-law is from there. There's family in the area. They own a house in Mililani. So fun connection. I just had to get that out of the way anyway. But with Dillon Gabriel, yeah, I agree right there. You're betting on an outlier because not only are you talking about a sub 6 foot quarterback, you're talking about a lefty. And there's always so many things you have to change in an offense when you have a left-handed quarterback. We've seen the Dolphins have to do this. The Falcons are working on that with Michael Penix Jr. You have to basically invert a lot of what your offensive line is doing, because then your right tackle becomes your blindside blocker. And then you have to really pretty much flip your playbook completely around for that quarterback, because there's so few guys. And that's not to say lefty quarterbacks don't work. There have been plenty of left-handed quarterbacks who have had a lot of success in the NFL. And when I look at Dillon Gabriel, yeah, he's been around the block a ton. Even looking at his numbers, 2,000 plus passes in his collegiate career. I really liked him more at UCF than I did at Oklahoma. I thought he was outstanding at UCF, put up really good numbers. And then Oregon this season, I know obviously didn't end well with, that collapse in the Rose Bowl, how poorly they started in that game. But if you look at the first 13 games of that season, he was awesome. I mean, that first game against Ohio State before they really got their defense together, they couldn't stop him. Like, he was just making great throw after great throw, Boyes was tremendous. He wasn't worried about pressure at all. Ohio State couldn't touch him, and he just kept making plays, and that was really impressive to watch with Dillon Gabriel. I don't know what happened in the Rose Bowl. Maybe it was just kind of Ohio State just carrying on some incredible momentum, but I don't think that takes away from the talent and what Dillon Gabriel did in college. He was obviously a sensational college quarterback. You can't take any of that away from him. But Dan, like you said, you're betting on something that doesn't really, unfortunately for Dillon Gabriel, have a lot of success.
Okay, real quick, we got to talk about this guy just because this is someone who moves the needle here with our listeners. People want to know about him. Will Howard, obviously a guy that a lot of Browns fans have circled as a potential, hey, could the Browns pass on a guy at 2 and end up taking Will Howard later in the draft? A lot of love for him after that playoff run. He's kind of I have said that I thought there would be a player who had a March Madness type rise, like the guy that just impresses for those 3 weeks in the tournament. It's like, that guy's going to be a star in the NBA. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Will Howard is that guy coming out of this college football playoff. So we don't have to spend a ton of time on him. Buckeye Talk, I'm sure, has done a lot on Will Howard. Go check those guys out. They do a great job over there, and they'll be mixing into this pot, I think, a little bit as we head towards the draft. Coming out of that Michigan game, all people were saying was, why did Ohio State go get this guy to run this offense? Then a month and a half later, it's, oh, Will Howard is going to be a star in the NFL. Tim, what do you think of Will Howard? I like him. I think he did some good things. I think it was a little inconsistent this year up until the playoff. But where do you think Will Howard lands, and what do you think of him as an NFL prospect?
I think he sneaks into day 2, maybe as early as the beginning of the 3rd round. I don't know if the Browns passed on quarterback twice, that they take him at 67, but there's a lot of things to like about Will Howard. I think he clearly has some charisma. You always remember the Indiana game where he was taunting Kurt Signetti by smoking the imaginary cigarette and putting it out on the turf. I feel like that's something that players can follow. Players kind of want to follow that kind of energy, and Will Howard, I think he plays with that energy, especially in the Notre Dame game when, last game of the season, you're going to run him more than you've ran him the entire season. And you see that kind of power running ability. He's not what Tim Tebow was as a college runner, but as far as that size goes, but you see some of that in there, just that power running ability, kind of another short yardage option. If you want to go in there, I could imagine a quarterback sneak with Will Howard being borderline unstoppable. And I think the biggest thing for Will Howard, I think he learned over the course of the season to be more aggressive. And basically in the playoff, he had the mentality of like, I have the best receiver in the country. I have a guy in Jeremiah Smith who's better than all but 10 receivers in the NFL right now. And I have another borderline first-round guy in Emeka Egbuka. Why not toss it up, give those guys a shot? He started to do that more and more as the season went on. And I think that was a big thing for me, was being more aggressive, being willing to take those shots. And if you throw an interception, yeah, it's not good, but you'd rather give your receiver a chance. And I think that was a big thing with Will Howard. And of course, the 4 games he had, obviously Tennessee was sensational, Oregon sensational. The Texas game where they really took Jeremiah Smith away and Will Howard had to really do a whole bunch of other different things in that game, that really impressed me too, because that Texas has a really good defense. There's a bunch of guys on that defense that are going to get drafted, including Andrew Mukuba, who I really love as a 3rd round, maybe 4th round safety option. But he had to really figure out how to win that game without Jeremiah Smith, and he did that. Obviously, Jack Sawyer with that scoop and score help, but Will Howard got them in position with the lead there. I think he's an interesting guy, certainly a product in some ways of the talent around him, but I really did like him coming out of Kansas State. I thought there was something to him, and good for Ohio State that, he was able to get it done and win a national title for them.
Someone in the chat throwing out the Browns fans' biggest fear for Will Howard. If you try to follow the Steelers, Big Ben all over again. Browns fans are petrified, I think, of Will Howard ending up in Pittsburgh and becoming a franchise quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't blame them. Browns fans have been through a lot and seen a lot. I do like Will Howard. I do want to like what he did. He was awesome in those playoff games, and he was a leader, and he was a big reason that Ohio State team came back from that Michigan loss and was able to make that run in the playoffs. So, like I said, we thought I'm just going to get a t-shirt made. There's something there. There's something there with Will Howard. Lance, what do you think of him?
I'm going to rain on the parade a little bit. I have some
That's fair.
concerns about what first of all, his playoff run was outstanding. And a lot of that comes with the team success. Even though he played great, I have some concerns about NFL throws. And the reason why is because it's a hard evaluation, first of all, because he plays with elite talent. That's not his fault. He did a great job of distributing the football. But if you look at a lot of his throws, he does a great job, like the Oregon game, throws it behind the line of scrimmage or throws it vertically. And that's really good. And he did a great job of it, but you don't see a lot of chunk throws. And then I thought his arm looked really good, but he wasn't really accurate at the combine, which I don't take a lot of stock in the combine. That will be for me. I'm still up in the air on Will Howard just because his ability to drive the ball from 15 to 25 yards on those digs, those high lows that everybody runs. If you talk about Kevin Stefanski, if you think about Njoku sitting in front of that backer and Judy running that dig behind him, and you read that backer, those are those driving those throws at the NFL level from 15 to 25 yards is something I want to see from Will Howard. That being said, everything you guys said was right. There's something there. He's a great leader. He got those guys going. They lost to Michigan because they ran 16 times vertically at Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham trying to prove their toughness, and that didn't work. And when they went to what they do best, and got the ball out, he did a great job. But if you look at a lot of his throws, that will be concerning to some because of the fact that they're behind the line of scrimmage or they're just flat out go routes. And Smith and Mbuka, they make great plays for him. Even though they're on target, they make great plays for him. That will be what teams want to see. They're going to want to see him drive the ball on those intermediate routes, which are huge in the NFL. That would be my only concern. However, the run was great. He ran the ball great. I don't understand why he didn't run the ball like he did at Kansas State. He seemed like, I don't know, he was really good in late at Ohio State, but he ran the ball so well at Kansas State and broke away a bunch of runs, right? Ran away from people. So there's athletic ability there. There's size. Once again, like you guys were saying, there's a lot of stuff to like about Will Howard, his leadership after a huge loss where the world was coming to an end for the Buckeyes. He's the one, I want to say single-handedly, but he was the maestro of making that run happen. So, and leadership, again, a quarterback you can win with.
Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, last point, I promise, real quick. I find it funny that when we're talking about, Will Howard, it's like the opposite problem with Shedeur Sanders. When Shedur's evaluation is complicated because he didn't have much around him. I think Will Howard's evaluation is complicated because he had so much around him because Ohio State brought just so many guys back. So just an interesting thought I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, and I think too, it's the difference between a guy we're talking about maybe at number 2 that, like you said, Lance, if you take a guy at number 2, he's the guy. If you take a guy in the 3rd round or the 4th round, we'll see, right? We're going to bring him along slowly. Maybe he's a backup or something, So I think you're going to be more critical of a guy at number 2 because you have to try and figure out what's real, what's not. So I think that might be part of it. Okay, we are going to take one more break here. That was a long segment. This pod is going long, but that's okay. We're talking quarterbacks. People love it. I'm assuming you guys are still good on time, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we are going to do a Browns-only mock draft, first 5 rounds. I'm not going to make you guys make those 3 6th-round picks yet, or maybe it's 4. It's a lot. Too many 6th-round picks. We'll do it eventually on this pod, not tonight, but quick break here, and we'll come back and do that. All right, back here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Something I need to tell everybody about. I think some of them are probably watching this. Our Football Insider subscription, where you can get a newsletter delivered every single day. Actually, after I'm done with this pod, I'm going to be writing the newsletter for Friday, so you'll get that in your inbox. You get to be one of our text subscribers. You can sign up for that. Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock, and I will text you when there's news. We'll text you analysis. I go in there and I respond to texts or try to. And I know I sent this out right as we went live, and so I'm thinking we probably have some texters sitting here watching this. So we certainly appreciate all of you folks who are texting, and I know a lot of you are podcast listeners too. So if you want to get involved with that, it's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. If you're looking for free ways to connect with us, find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just look for Orange and Brown Talk. Find us on Instagram. Look for Orange and Brown Talk. Head to Twitter, X, whatever you call it nowadays, Orange Brown Talk. A little bit different there. And of course, you're watching this on YouTube. But if you are listening on the pod, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com is the YouTube channel. All right, let's do this. I got to try and share my screen here. So let's make sure I can pull this off. All right, hitting share here, hitting screen. Make sure I pick the right tab here. I don't have anything that's going to get me in trouble, so that's okay. Where are you? All right, we're using PFF. we change around usually what we do with our mock draft simulator. And for this first one, we are going to use Pro Football Focus first. So Tim and Lance, I'm assuming you guys can see that, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. For this exercise, like I said, it sets up perfectly to where this week we're going to take Shough. Next week we'll take Travis Hunter. Spoiler alert. Week after that we'll take Abdul Carter. So it kind of gives us some wiggle room as far as, you know, what we do the rest of the draft. So I got it set up here for 5 rounds. We will get things started. PFF can be a little weird, so they might not have the Titans taking Cam Ward. I don't care. We're going to say that the Titans do take Cam Ward. And let me make sure I got all our settings set up here. And I am going to enter the draft. So here we go, getting the draft started. We are not going to make trades right now. So there we go. PFF did fix it. They did take Cam Ward. So like I said, we will do a draft where they take Abdul Carter, and we'll make the case for Abdul Carter. And we'll do a draft where they take Travis Hunter. We'll make the case for Travis Hunter. PFF is not huge on Shedeur Sanders, as you can see, as I'm scrolling down here, a lot of names that a lot of people wish the Browns would just take maybe instead of Shedeur, but we're all on board with Shedeur. Where is this guy? Man, PFF really doesn't like him.
I find it surprising because, like, I think they tweeted about it the other day.
There he
Sanders
is.
has the exact same completion percentage and the exact same number of touchdowns on deep balls as Cam Ward.
Yeah, well, here we go. We found him. You're right, Tim. He's at 46. So we're going to take, they're not going to like this one. We're going to take the player who's 46th on their big board here at number 2. So now it gets interesting. Now we get to pick number 33 with the Browns on the clock. So some of the names available. James Pierce, I did not expect him to be available. I'm not going to read every name, but as we kind of go along here, you guys can see who's available. Tyleik Williams, I know that's the guy that you like, Lance. I really like Landon Jackson. We'll talk a little bit about him when we do our edge rush selections. I do want to see. So Nick Skirton's a guy I like. He went 30th to the Bills. And I want to see where my guy
Buka 24.
Oh, my guy Ezariki. My guy Ezariki went 16th. I don't like that.
Love to make
what about my guy Luther Burden? Where's he
31st?
I think Luther Burden went. So Tim, you're an Ezaraku guy.
Yeah, I love the bend off the edge with him. I mean, like, ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Like, if you're gonna have a compliment to Myles Garrett, why not have a guy who's really bendy off that edge?
If James Pierce is actually here at 33, you have to take him, right? We can say that maybe that's not realistic and we won't take him, but I feel like if he's sitting there at 33, he's got to be on that list of guys you would take.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point, I think, maybe as recently as like a year and a half ago, where he was considered the number 1 pick in this entire class.
I like him too.
I tell you what, I'm huge.
Here's one of my guys too, but it's too high.
I'm huge on Tyleik Williams. I don't have him as my top guy. Obviously Graham is, and I love Kenneth Grant. But Tyleik Williams, man, you watch him on film. Boy, is he explosive. Big upside. Great in the scheme fit. I like him better than Pierce, but I love Pierce too. But I like Pierce too, though. I'm with you.
All right, so Tim, who's the one guy here that you like? We know that Lance likes. We know that Lance likes Tyleik Williams. So is Pierce the guy here for you, or is there somebody else?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna throw Pierce out just because I feel like we all can understand that's not going to happen. Like, he's a top 20 guy.
Yeah,
Jaden Higgins really intrigues me. I mean, the guy doesn't drop anything. Although I also have to give some love to his teammate Jalen Knoll. I think I would love Jalen Knoll. Cam Scadaboo, I cannot wait to talk about him next week. I love listening to him in the combine. You know, he's got an aura around him, and he said he used to do the Ric Flair woo thing in high school when he ran over a guy. But I really like Josh Connerly, the tackle from Oregon. I value offensive linemen who can move in space, and Josh Connerly is one of the best movers in this entire draft. He's a younger guy, little undersized, but I think you can afford to let him get a little stronger, but you can't teach the movement ability that Josh Connerly Jr. has. And with his ability to move in space, it's so paramount in a zone type of scheme that Kevin Stefanski's trying to bring back to the Browns. So I really like him. I'm not sure if I would take him or Jaden Higgins, just because I feel like by the time you get to 94, I worry where the receiver depth goes at that point, especially because I want to earmark 67 potentially for a running back.
Okay, so Lance knows this. I am a big Jaden Higgins guy. If this were the way the board played out, and if we're ruling Pierce out, if we're just going to say, hey, come on, that's messed up, Pierce is off the board, well, then maybe our guy Donovan would be available at 33, but whatever. This would be a trade back possibility for me, because then I could trade back and I could get Jaden Higgins. I could trade back and I could get Landon Jackson, two guys I really like. And there's other edge rushers I like here too. There's other receivers that we haven't seen on this list that I think are still out there as well. But listen, this would not be one of our Browns only mock drafts if we didn't start off by completely overruling Lance Reisland. So
Absolutely. Love it.
I'm kind of team trade back, but I said we weren't going to do that. There's not really someone who matches. I just feel like, again, as much as I love Jaden Higgins, I just don't know if I want to take him at 33. Tackle is such a glaring need for this team because DeJuan Jones probably going to get that first shot at left tackle, but coming off injury again, has yet to finish a season. I think you've got to come away with a tackle at some point in this draft. So sorry, Lance. We're letting Tim have this one.
You're always good though. You guys know me. I'm always okay with O-line, D-line. That's never a bother. I agree. You gotta be good up front. So
okay. So here we are at 67. I actually really like Shamar Turner. I think he's really good. He was playing on a stress fracture last year that didn't fully heal. He's really good. He's a disruptor on the inside. Some questions about sort of his personality and maybe, is there a little Ndamukong Suh in there? I think the Browns can use a little mean on that defense. I would love it. If we take Shamar Turner here, I'd be happy about that. Tim, you want to make a case for a running back?
Well, who's at running? Well, I
Let's
see
find
Dylan
out.
Sampson.
Let's find out who we got here.
I saw Cam.
So your running backs on the board: Dylan Sampson, RJ Harvey. There's
a
lot of
there
those
that I like.
Yeah, Tootin is still on the board.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, as much as I would love to take Travion Henderson at 33 or Omari and Hampton if he fell, I'm okay waiting to the third round. I am really starting to fall in love with DJ Giddens from Kansas State, and I'll at some point, maybe next week, I'll share a screen on this. But I decided to do some extra work and go through explosive run rates. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's how many times you're gaining 10 or more yards per carry. Basically a percentage rate. And there's a whole bunch of advanced analytics done about it where that success correlates to what you were able to do in the NFL. Good example, Bucky Irving last year, everybody didn't think he was good enough at the combine. Led the NFL in rookie rushing yards last season. Explosive run rate, 18.3%. That was better than Devon Achane and Kenneth Walker in their respective draft years. Better than Jahmyr Gibbs in his draft year. Than Tyrone Tracy of the Giants. No, I didn't think much of Tyrone Tracy. Explosive run rate in his final year, 21.9%. That's better. That's 3 percentage points better than Nick Chubb in his final year at Georgia. So there's something to that. And with DJ Giddens and actually RJ Harvey's there as well, 23.4%. But DJ Giddens also has a really good number, 17.5%. I know I'm throwing percentages out there. At some point, I'll share my chart. I promise I'll share it at some point. But I think with all those different skill players out there, I see Trey Harris is out there. He's got great hands. Is Jalen Knowles still there?
Jalen Knowles is still there. Jalen Royals is there.
Savion Williams is so interesting. He feels like Cordero Patterson, another Cordero Patterson to me. I kind of torn because as much as I like DJ Giddens, do I want to wait for him and take a guy in Jalen Noel who, while he is small, man, he can make plays. He is just a big play machine out there. I remember him. I think he had a couple big catches in the Cyhawk game against Iowa way back at the beginning of the season. To me, I think he needs as much love as Jaden Higgins does.
Yeah, I like both those guys. I like Higgins more, but I like both the Iowa State receivers. I am actually not team running back here. I think the depth of this class, and again, this is something that I've texted. There's a couple guys on that day 3 that I really like. And I can't wait to talk about this running back class. I'm not going to spoil it right here. I really like some running backs on day 3 that I think you could fit into this scheme and they can work. So here's the guys, Lance, that I would pound the table for right here. Trey Harris, Jalen Noah, any of these receivers. Now, I think I would hope one of these guys will still be there at 94. I haven't looked at the tight ends that are available right now, but Mason Taylor is on the board. So I would maybe consider him at this spot. I think he's probably gone by 94. And again, I'm just going to say, if you get me Shamar Turner, I think he's a dude. I know he's maybe not the ideal size for what the Browns do at defensive tackle. And I know you used a high pick on a defensive tackle last year in Mike Hall. You watch that Texas A&M defensive line. Like there's just dudes on that line. I love Skirton. I love Shamar Stewart. I think Shamar Turner's a player. That's a guy that I would consider here. Lance, any names stand out?
Yeah, can you go give me some tight ends again, real quick?
Let me get over there and pull up the tight end. So, like I said, Mason Taylor is definitely still on the board. Probably gone by the time we come back on the clock again. Terrence Ferguson. There's Harold Fannin, interesting guy. If you look at the board, maybe you get him first thing on Saturday, but that might be a little risky. Gunnar Helm is a nice player.
Yeah, Gunnar Helm, I want to say, ran the 40 of the combine on a sprained ankle. So
yeah,
he sprained it on a false start. So I on my mind, I threw everything he did at the combine out. And honestly, the fact that he did all that stuff on the bad ankle tells me more about Gunnar Helm than his test results did.
Mason Taylor's got the bloodlines.
All right, I'm gonna go Harold Fannin here. If I have, I noticed it's in theory when I'm picking, but Harold Fannin to me, in terms of if the Browns are going to go back to 12 and 13 personnel, and let's think about 12 personnel. So if you got 12 personnel and you can get a receiver, however, maybe Tillman gets better. They have Judy. So now if you can get a guy like Harold Fannin who can, at 230, he's undersized, so he can do a little bit. That motion, he can do a little bit of that flex tight end where he can motion and be a fullback at times. I know he's a tough kid, but he can also be a flex tight end. And what Kevin Stefanski likes to do is he likes to get in those, when you go 12 and 13 personnel, defenses are going to go regular personnel and you're going to get 3 backers in the game. That means Harold Fannin, who is a mismatch against any linebacker. In terms of the third round, a lot of people I'm a Harold Fannin. He had 117 catches this year and played great against big schools. And I know I know, Dan, you and I had some back and forth about running style and all that kind of stuff. And I know all about your backs that you like, but I'm going to go Harold Fannin here just because of production. He can do a flex. And I like Ferguson out of Oregon as well, too, in terms of doing the same kind of thing. But the production out of Harold Fannin, that's my choice is Harold Fannin. I like what you guys picked though, too. So I won't be offended.
Yeah, well, okay. Look, I'm just gonna say it, and then this is one of those weird things you say during draft season. I just think Harold Fannin runs funny. That's all. But he's a big guy. A lot of tight ends run. David Njoku runs kind of funny. So these guys kind of run funny. But I have flashbacks a little bit sometimes to Harrison Bryant, who was a okay tight end. But he won the Mackey, had a big game against Ohio State, put up some big numbers, got to the NFL, and he was kind of just a guy. I think Harold Fannin is better than Harrison Bryant. I will say that, but that's all. I do think, though, if we're playing the board, and see, this is why sometimes Lance gets overruled. If we're playing the board, I feel like we're going to get one of these tight ends if we want to, either at 94 or to start off Saturday at 104. And that's how I feel about running back too.
Yeah, I do want to say this maybe first. I would co-sign Lance's pick. I mean,
okay, well that would be 2 to 1. So
I mean, what stands out for me, I don't think as much about the 40 time. The 3-cone time for Harold Fannin of the combine was sensational, and you see that in the way he maneuvers. I think he had an amazing touchdown catch and run. I believe maybe it was against Texas A&M. I think.
Yeah, on a corner route. Yep.
Yeah, and that's against SEC guys. I know there's not as much delineation between SEC and Big Ten anymore, but played well against Penn State, played well at Texas A&M. I mean, I think he should be ranked much higher than 103rd. Maybe he's not flashy, but man, oh man, I just love fluidity from that position, for just that combination of Fannin and Njoku. I think there's a lot there I really love about Harold Fannin. I think when I did my tight end rankings, I believe he was my tight end 3 behind Tyler Ward and Colston Loveland.
Okay, well, all right. Harold Fannin it is. We're going to make the pick. The draft room has spoken. I will be texting you guys when Shamar Turner has 6 sacks as a rookie from the interior. That's all right. We're going Harold Fannin. I actually do like the pick. I like Harold Fannin. The only thing that would have given me pause there is maybe could we have played the draft position game, but sometimes you just got to take a guy. So here we are sitting at 94. We got 2 more picks that we're going to get to make. This would be Friday night still. Let's see. Do we want to look at receivers?
How about a safety? Can I get a 1 hi-hat safety? Can I get
Lance,
Billy Bowman right now?
You are preaching to the choir if we're going to talk safeties.
Can we get Billy Bowman?
I think that is an underrated need for this football team. So,
and a 1 hi-hat. I'm going to say they leave Delpit down in the box. Give me a 1 hi-hat. Give me.
You got to go up a little bit. I think you just
did
clicked
I miss
special
it?
teams.
Yeah, I did click. There it is. There's safety. Let me clear out wide receiver and special teams here. All right. Work in progress here, folks. All right. There we go. Safeties.
Well, there's your guy, Tim.
Andrew Makuba.
Yep.
Smaller guy.
Jonas Sanker.
There he is.
I like him.
There's my guy.
We all have safeties we love out of here. Sanker, Bowman, Makuba. I mean, Makuba's a smaller guy, but if I'm thinking ball hawk center field safeties, that's Andrew Makuba to a T. I mean, I'm not as worried about size. You don't need a bigger safety when you already have Grant Delpit in run support. I want a guy who you could just stick back in center field safety, let him read everything, and then react to it. And Makuba was such a great player for Texas this season. Former Clemson, transfer from Clemson, and really fit in very well in that defense.
And I like the idea of setting up a safety room where you can just let Grant Delpit be that guy in the box. I think that's where he fits best. I think that's where he makes the most impact. And I know they're going to move their safeties around a lot and do different things, but I think the more that you can have Grant Delpit in the box, the better. So give me that center fielder. Give me that guy that can replace Juan Thornhill. You're not leaving me with just Ronnie Hickman back there. That's really what I'm looking for.
All right, here we go. Billy Bowman ran a 4.42.
Okay.
Has 11 interceptions. Played very well in Oklahoma. Can get down in the box if needed. He's not long. However, he had some struggles in terms of 50-50 balls, but is a absolute one of the best. I think him and Xavier Watts in terms of breaking down what they see, reading it, and pulling that trigger. Billy Bowman he's my third safety. So I think obviously I love Malachi Starks, I love Xavier Watts, but Billy Bowman is a guy. Like I said, the Browns need a guy back there that can tackle and get the ball and get some interceptions. And Watts does that. I like the kid out of Texas too. So I'm okay with all these safeties. I think but for me, my choice would be Billy Bowman. But I'm on board with all these safeties.
I'm gonna have regrets that we're probably not gonna come away with a wide receiver in these days, but sort of like running back, there's day 3 guys that I like there. Jalen Lane's a guy I absolutely love. So he'd be a guy that I would circle for day 3 if we don't come away with a wide receiver here. If you guys want to go safety, we can go safety. And, Tim, if we're working off the big board, Billy Bowman is a stretch. But remember, the Browns don't have a 5th round pick. So, they've got to think about that when they go on. That's why I actually think at some point they are going to trade down and try and add something in that 5th round, or maybe they use some of their 6ths to move up into the 5th round. But should we just give Lance? Should we give Lance something here, Tim? Should we just throw Lance a bone? We need him for 3 more weeks.
There's plenty to like about Billy Bowman. I have Makuba ranked higher, but there's a lot to like about Bowman. Even looking at PFF's report about him, got the draft guide just as my secondary resource. First thing about him, blazing speed. And if you're going to be a center field safety, one thing you got to be able to do is track the football in the air and be able to just fly to whoever's there. And if you have a guy who's got speed that's almost 4.4 flat, is able to do that, worth a flyer there, certainly.
All right, we're doing it. Lance, here you go. Billy Bowman. We've learned over the years that these guys, you like them. All right, here we go. Last pick here. There's Damian Martinez. Again, you look at some of these wide receivers, maybe you could go a little bit later here. Isaiah Bond, who is not my favorite. I love Matthew Golden. I think he's the better of the Texas receivers, but he's not going to make it to where you want him. here's our guy, Will Howard. If we want to go double quarterback, feels a little bit high to make that move. Gunnar Helm still on the board, but we took a tight end already. Who do you guys like here? We haven't addressed edge rusher, right? Have we?
I don't think so. I like Ashton Gillot. I mean, he's got a really good pass rush win rate. If I'm looking for tools, I mean, guys who can win a one-on-one, that's where I would take him. I hate to crush your dreams, Dan, but I would rather wait on Gillot than take Landon Jackson a little earlier. Jackson seems like doesn't quite have those kind of that win rate that Gillot has. But running back, I saw Damian Martinez was there. Big Damian Martinez guy. Got a chance to listen to him at the combine as well. You know, he maybe doesn't have as much juice as Caleb Johnson, but I think there's a good power element to Damian Martinez's game. I double checking his explosive run rate, exactly 15%, slightly better than the Jerome Ford's when he got drafted. Ford was about 0.95%. Martinez is a solid 15. And whether or not if you have runs, you bring Nick Chubb back, you need a power element in your running game. And I think Damian Martinez does that. It seems like he always finds a way to fall forward and gain yards. And I got to imagine if you're a defensive coordinator, there's nothing more annoying than going against a running back who, no matter how you bring him down, he always falls forward.
Yeah, I'm fine if we want to go that direction here. There are running backs I like, but we're getting to that point where these guys are going to start coming off the board. Like, I would love to, the guy that Lance and I have texted about him a little bit. Somebody's going to come away with Trevor Etienne on day 3 and be ridiculously happy with that draft pick. But I don't know if we can sit around and wait for that. And this is probably too high to take him. So yeah, I'm fine with taking Damian Martinez here. Lance, does that work for you?
All right, so I'm gonna go. First of all, you guys have agreed with me on 2 picks, so there's no way you're going to agree with this one. So first of all, Martinez, not even close. Martinez, I like, and Martinez for me gets you to second 5, and I've said that to you guys a bunch. I'm also going to throw 2 more names out to you. First of all, I do not care what he ran in terms of what the Browns need at receiver. They need an easy yards guy. Tez Johnson is an easy yards guy. He's not going to blow you away, but he can work in that slot. He can work option routes. He's sudden, twitchy. I love him. The other guy I'll go to bat for is Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. He's a kid that is a perfect fit. He's a hybrid. Worry about what's going on with JOK. He kind of fits that mold. He can cover. He's a great blitzer. Really liked what he did at Oregon. He runs very well. Ton of tackles. Very knowledgeable. Like I said, he's a great A/B gap blitzer. So I would say I like everything you guys said. The Tez Johnson thing, that's a guy I love, and I don't care what he ran, because when you watch him on the football field, his size worries me more than his speed, if you really want to know the case. But in the slot, he's fine. Martinez, I'm a big Martinez fan, and I'm a big ETN fan. Martinez, I think the Browns need a guy to get to second 5. If you want to help the quarterback, get to a good down and distance.
Yeah, and again, I go back to this name, just another guy that I love that maybe I can get later on day 3 at receiver. That I think Jalen Lane is another guy the Browns need. This slot guy, he wins fights in a phone booth. That's what he does when he has the football in his hands. So I like him. All right, so Tim, if I'm in the war room and I want to make the case for this, and like Lance just did, I'm maybe looking at you saying, yeah, we need a running back, but who's playing linebacker for this football team, especially if Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah can't go in 2025, which we still don't know what's going on with that. We don't know if he's going to be on the field, if we're going to show up in the spring and he's going to be out there, or if we're going to show up in the 3rd week of September and we still don't know what's happening. Now you've got Devin Bush and Mahmoud Diabate, and I love Jordan Hicks, but he's not getting any younger. You do have to figure out who's playing linebacker for this football team.
Yeah, I'm assuming based on these rankings that Barrett Carter from Clemson is gone. He's another guy I absolutely love. He's one of my favorite He's one of my favorite back 7 guys in this draft. I loved him throughout his time at Clemson. Maybe this might be a reach, and it's going to be the Will Howard argument all over it.
There's Barrett Carter.
Okay, that's my guy right there. I was about to make the argument for Cody Simon, because heart and soul of that Ohio State defense, Cody Simon. Maybe it's the Will Howard effect on defense, where he was just so good throughout the playoff games that it's hard to not look at that. But I think there's a lot to like about a linebacker who plays with passion, plays downhill, and really can drag guys into the fight. And I feel like that's Cody Simon. But Barrett Carter, when I wrote about my linebackers, Carter, barely cracked my top 5 because, he's a smaller guy. He's a shorter guy, maybe not as athletic as JOK, maybe a similar body type, maybe a little stronger than JOK was coming out of Notre Dame. But Carter, just a really productive guy out of Clemson, and a guy I think, if you're looking to replace JOK, why not get a guy with a similar body type?
Lance, do you, I guess when you compare these two, I'm obviously Boss is the guy you prefer.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of Carter?
I like Carter. I think everything he said in terms of bringing the fight, I think that's a great, he has a little bit of an attitude in terms of like he plays a little nasty. I like his ability to read and get downhill. And in Schwartz's defense, remember, you're not reading that double team and coming off that double team. You're in charge of a gap. I'm really okay with either Bossa or Carter. I think Bossa is a great scheme fit. I think Carter maybe have a little better upside as a true linebacker. Both cover very well. I think Bossa has really fluid hips when he covers. He's actually covered some slots. He's covered tight ends. He's covered backs out in that Oregon scheme. But I can absolutely sign off on Barrett Carter as well.
Okay, we have consensus then. We're going linebacker. Wow. We almost went running back, and then at the last second, we decided to go linebacker. That makes me very happy. So anyway, 4 rounds in the books. At some point, we are going to do a full 7-round draft, but that would have kept us here till about 10 o'clock at night. Listen, they gave us an F for Shough. Oh my gosh, they gave us bad grades for this draft, guys. And actually, so we got an F for Shedeur, an A- for Connerly, an F for Harold Fannin, an F for Billy Bowman, and a D for Barrett Carter. That's harsh. You know what? I take pride in that. Doubt us in April. We're going to win games in September. That's what I say.
I mean, that's
every time we do this, on my grades are pretty low.
Well,
it's okay though.
I was gonna say a lot of people hated John Schneider's early drafts in Seattle, and look what happened there. But I mean, honestly, Lance, I think I'll give you credit. You've got a track record with guys. Ivan Pace, obviously, you can own that one for the next 20 years. That you were right. But I mean,
I only sent you guys both like 30 texts a game on both of those guys. So
yeah, it's kind of funny. We have Dion's kid here, and then we have a junior. We have junior, back to back. It's just kind of funny how that works out.
All right,
I like it. I don't care what they say. I think that's an outstanding draft right there.
Hey, you know what I say? Don't worry about it. Just pick good football players. Just give me good football players. That's
guys that can play. Guys that can play, no doubt.
All right. Well, there we go. Our first mock draft in the book. It was Shedeur Sanders, Josh Connerly, Harold Fannin, Billy Bowman, and Barrett Carter. So that was fun. We're back at it. So we're going to do 2 more of these before the draft. We're going to talk playmakers next week, and then we're going to talk edge rushers the week after that. Perfect fit into the Browns. We'll also throw some other positions into that last podcast. The pods are going to run every Friday, so you're going to have plenty of time to listen to these. We're going to try to go live again next week again on YouTube. I think that worked out pretty well, so we'll give that a shot to go live again. Shoot for about Thursday at 6 o'clock. If you're not subscribed to this podcast, again, find us on Apple Podcasts, find us on Spotify. If you're not a Football Insider subscriber, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get info on that. All the socials, Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk, X, Twitter, Orange Brown Talk. I had some texters say I should get on Blue Sky. Maybe at some point. I don't know. That's a lot of social media for me to have to deal with. And then, of course, on YouTube, so you can watch these live videos. And we do put all of our pods, or most of our pods, in full up on YouTube as well. So if you prefer watching, you can do that. It's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. All right, Tim and Lance, glad to be back together. Glad to be doing these. Appreciate your time. And we will talk to everyone later. All right.
That was awesome. You guys